Hi, I'm Kristi Arzola. I've been painting with watercolors for over 20 years and love sharing what I've learned with others. Thanks for being here, and I hope you paint along with me. These are the materials I'll be using in today's lesson. Please pause the video and refer to the video description for a complete list. I used practically all paint colors for this painting. You could definitely edit, but for those of you who want to know, I used alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, lemon yellow, Payne's gray, ultramarine, cerulean blue, cadmium orange, purple lake, permanent rose, and viridian hue. You can pause the video and refer to the video description for an exact list of these colors, but you by all means do not need this many. Just use what you have and have fun. Also in the video description is both a line drawing and a reference photo that you can download for free and print at home. If you are not familiar with how to do a transfer, which is getting your line drawing onto your watercolor paper without having to draw it, please refer to my How to Do a Line Transfer video. I'm going to begin by mixing a variety of colors to use on today's colorful kitten painting. So I'm using my number 10 round to transfer water from my water cup over to my paint palette. I plan on mixing quite a few different colors, but not a large quantity since this is such a small painting. So I've put just a single bead of water in each of the wells of my palette, and one of the first colors I'm going to use is the lemon yellow. And anytime I feel like the color may be exactly what I'm looking for, I test the value of the paint color on a scrap piece of paper. I'm also going to be using some cadmium orange. I'm going to be using some alizarin crimson. And the alizarin crimson is watered down quite a bit, so it's a little bit more of a pink. I will also be using a little bit of purple dioxine. Both cerulean blue as well as ultramarine blue. I'm going to be using some permanent rose pink. And at the very end, I will be using a little bit of Payne's gray, which I will mix to be quite dark so it's closer to a black. And lastly, I'm going to use a little bit of viridian hue for a teal color. So once you have all of your paint colors mixed up, essentially we're just creating a rainbow. Then we'll begin painting. I will be painting most of today's kitten using the wet on dry technique. I currently have a kneaded eraser in my hands, and I'm just lightly tapping any of the dark lines that I feel may show up through the paint colors that I don't want. So the ends of the tassels are something where I don't really want an visible edge. The ends of the ears get quite dark, so I'm not so worried about that. Same with the eyes, nose, and mouth also get quite dark, so they don't really need to be lightened up too much. Now the white paws, however, are a little different, so I'm just doing a light tap on them. So I'm using a number 6 round. I'm going to get it wet with clean water. And I'm first going to start off with just applying some clean water to the pillow. so I can kind of get a base color around my subject. I'm being careful when I'm close to the kitten itself, making sure to keep my water short so I don't get into the kitten's body itself. So I'm going around the feet and fur. I don't need a huge amount of water since this is such a small shape. So if I tip the paper, you can see where my water is at. I don't want any puddling. If I see puddling, I dry my brush off on a sponge and I soak up that excess water because that's going to further dilute my colors, which I don't want. So use a dry brush to soak up any puddling water. So I always start with the lightest color, which will be my lemon yellow in this case. And right at the corner of the pillow, I'm going to add some yellow, keeping in mind that I'm not going to be filling things in so that they're perfect. I kind of want a textured appearance. After the yellow, I'm going to do a little bit of orange. Anytime I get close to the kitten, I really slow down, use light pressure with my brush so I can get into narrow, small spaces with this brush. I'm now going to get some of the permanent rose pink. I'm now going to get some of the dioxine purple. I'm wiping away the excess so that the purple doesn't travel too far when I add it to the water. When I get close to the kitten's fur, I really want to kind of keep my brush strokes more textured so it looks like there's fur overlapping the pillow itself. After I've worked with the purple, I'm going to grab some of that cerulean blue. I'm trying to embrace just letting the colors kind of mix and mingle with whatever colors are nearby without having to stress about it. I'm keeping this cerulean blue along the bottom edge of the pillow. I'm going to grab some of that Viridian hue to add a little bit of teal towards the back edge. I'm going to add some of that Viridian hue on the bottom front edge as well. Now I like the idea of creating kind of this shadow underneath the pillow. So I am being willing to come in with a little bit of water to kind of extend some of this color and use it to create this shadow color, reflected color on the ground below. I'm going around the knot and tassels on the corner of the pillow. Anywhere where I still have a glossy sheen, I have additional working time to add color. So I'm using the ultramarine blue, which is the darker of the two blues, to kind of get some darker color in at the bottom here. I don't need a lot of it though, so I'm making sure to really wipe the excess paint off my brush before I'm going to my painting, just so it doesn't completely overpower the other colors. As long as you still have a little bit of that glossy sheen left, you've got some working time to kind of play with your colors. But just know, if you want a nice, neat end product, you want to be mindful of when your paper begins to dry and get out before. I'm using just a little bit of permanent rose pink just to add a little fun color to the shadows. And right now I don't really have any definition between the pillow and the floor, but that's okay. That can come with a second layer. So right now I'm just kind of embracing the colorful subject at the moment, and any additional details will come later. I'm using water to kind of soften some of these edges. All right, so while that pillow is drying, I'm going to go ahead and switch my focus to the kitten's head. I'm still going to paint with my colors here, but I'm using a small number 2 round, and I'm painting wet on dry this time. So I'm starting off with my lemon yellow, and I'm going to put a little bit of this yellow in between the eyes of the kitten, and I'm going to extend this yellow fur over each of the brows. I'm also going to add some of this lemon yellow to go around some of the chest of the cat. So I kind of want to maintain a white chest, but on both left and right side, I'm just adding some of this yellow. I'm also going to add a little bit of this same yellow just towards the back. Now, although some of that yellow hasn't dried, I'm okay with immediately going to my cadmium orange and continuing to work on some of this fur texture. So I'm still on the forehead with this orange, but I'm trying my best not to completely cover up and lose some of those vibrant yellows that are already established. So I'm continuing with this orange just on the outside of that yellow fur. I'm going to rinse the orange out of my brush, and I'm going to get some of that alizarin crimson. Now this alizarin crimson is watered down, so it is not quite as dark, and it looks more like a pink. So I'm continuing with this soft alizarin crimson along the top of the head. I'm going to continue with this color through some of the center of the ears. Notice that my brush texture is mimicking that fur, and I'm doing my best not to just fill it in. I'm allowing some of that negative space to create interest. I'm continuing with the alizarin crimson just on the outside of some of the orange that are on the front legs. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. I'm going to extend some of this alizarin crimson into the body of the kitten, just behind that front leg. I'm now going to rinse my brush and use some of the permanent rose pink. And I want to make sure this color isn't too dark. I want to use a lighter version of it because this will be going on the cheeks of the kitten. So I want it to be very subtle and soft. So I'm going to go right underneath the eye, and I'm going to stay towards the right edge with this pink. And I'm kind of keeping a rounded shape so that it looks like it's going around the cheek. I'm going to do this on the left side as well, starting underneath the eye towards the outside and keeping my texture kind of rounded. I'm now going to switch to my cerulean blue, which is the lighter of my two blues. I'm going to get just a little bit of this blue to go along the outside edge of the head on the right side. Trying to add some variety of length to my line work. And I'm trying to allow some of that negative space to still shine through so it looks like fur. I'm going to continue with some of this blue towards the back of the cat. Varying my lines again and embracing that negative space. I'm rinsing that blue out of my brush. I'm now going to get some of that dioxine purple. However, I don't want it to be too dark, so just something that's a little washed out to start off, and we can kind of build to our darker values later. I'm just going to go to the body of my kitten, kind of creating this rounded curve. If your brush is leaving puddles of paint on your paper, you're just overloading your brush, and you need to tap your brush onto a sponge or paper towel so that you're not creating puddles on your painting. It just makes it easier to control. I'm going to continue to use this purple along the side of the head near the blue. And I'm just going to check on the status of the pillow. As long as the pillow is completely dry, we can continue with fur texture that comes in contact with the pillow and not have to worry about it. So I'm using that watered down purple dioxine just to add some fur texture towards the bottom here. Now, if we mix a little bit of that lemon yellow with that purple, we get kind of this neutral, kind of dirty gold color, which is really great for shadows. So I'm going right in between the paws where I need more of a defining shadow so that those little white paws pop forward. So now that I've added some of that color in between the legs to make those little paws pop forward, I can also use this color on the underside of the chin. So I want to just imagine kind of this little flat line underneath the cat's head. And I can add just a few little hair textures on the chest, but I don't want to be as dark. I'm now going to take my alizarin crimson and mix it with that viridian hue. And I'm going to get a little bit more of a neutral gray tone. And if I want it to be leaning on the warmer side, I just make sure to stay heavier with my red tones. And it kind of creates this warm gray. I'm going to use this warm gray to push some of the shadows on the right side of my kitten. There's not many of them, so I'm not going too heavy. I can also use this warm gray on the underside of the kitten's feet. I can add a little bit of Payne's gray to it if I want, or more purple. So I want shadows behind the legs so they pop forward more. I also want a bit of shadows on the pillow beneath the fur so it looks like the kitten's sitting. I'm going to add a little bit more shadow on the left. To again try to push that kitten's leg forward more. And continuing with some of that shadow color underneath the fur. I'm going to add a shadow to the bottom of the pillow. Now, to ensure I don't have just this flat, hard edge line, I'm going to rinse my brush, wipe away the excess water from my brush, and I'm going to use this mildly damp brush to kind of feather and blend that shadow in with some of the ground textures. And then I can continue with my shadow. So again, I paint just a little bit of that shadow color just underneath the pillow. I don't go very far. And I rinse that brush, use that mildly damp brush to kind of pull that bottom edge of that paint stroke to blend a bit. And I can do that on the opposite side as well. Rinse the paint out of my brush. And do some blending. I'm now going to use a little bit of that Viridian hue, making sure it's watered down so it's not too dark, on just the back of the kitten. I'm going to use a little bit of a burnt sienna, which is kind of like a rusty brown. And I'm going to use this color on the outside edges of the kitten's ears. Trying to allow a little bit of space between this color and the pink insides of the ear. And I want to keep it textured on the outside edge so it looks like fur. So I'm not smoothing everything out. And I'm going to do that to both ears. I'm going to continue with this color through some areas on the cat's body. So just a touch of this color on top of some of the pinks and oranges we have in other areas, in the areas where we have shadows. I'm going to water this color down so it's not quite as dark, just so I can add a splash of it to the fur on the head. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. Add a little bit towards the bottom here. I'm going to use some of that burnt sienna with the Payne's gray to make a little bit more of a brown tone, but I want to water it down so it's not too dark. I'm just adding this color to some of the shadows, allowing there to still be space though in between my brush strokes. Don't forget to pause from time to time to really look at your reference photo to guide you. It's easy to go on autopilot. I'm going to get more of that cadmium orange. It's a little darker now, less of a pastel. I just want to brighten up some of the color on the head of this kitten. I can use a really watered down version of this orange just to get a splash of some light color around the white chest. I'm going to use a little bit of a watered down kind of purple gray tone to give the white paws some details. So I want to create a crease where the paws separate. I don't want to put too much color in the front paws themselves because they're mostly white, but I do want to darken up some of the fur that's behind those front paws. So I'm using this soft gray purple just to kind of help me determine what that shape might look like. And then I can use that gray purple to start adding some of those shadows. I can use that gray purple to also darken the shadows between the legs. Still trying to keep that color nice and light. If I water this gray purple down even further, I can use it to help give a little bit more shape around the chin and head. I'm going to water down some of the brown I have, keeping it really soft, just to add a little bit of color above the brow area on the right side. Now I'm going to use my darker Payne's gray to create a little ridge along the center of the pillow. And I am just keeping my brush practically vertical. And I am barely applying any pressure so that I have this really nice narrow line. It's not perfect, but I rather kind of take my time and have an imperfect line than go back and try and trace and then just make the line wider and wider. So be mindful of it. I can also use this Payne's Gray just to darken a small amount of the shadow underneath the pillow. And if I need to, I can take a damp brush to blend some of that shadow on the bottom. I'm going to use some of that darker ultramarine blue to help push some of that shadow color. I'm intentionally keeping my line textured. Can always use that damp brush to blend things. So I'm now going to grab some of that permanent rose pink. And I want to darken some of the shadows underneath my kitten. I'm embracing having some texture. If there's petals, I just dry my brush and soak them up. I'm going to use more of that pink on my cat. Just to push some of the values. And continue adding some of that pink to the body of the cat. If I feel there's an area where I want to get a little bit more color. I'm going to work on the tassel area of the pillow. I'm going to use that permanent pink for the knots, just to kind of create a dot. If there's puddling, I just soak that up so it dries faster. I'm going to use the lighter blue, the cerulean blue, for the eyes of the cat. I'm not worried about the pupil or the white reflection because I have some white opaque paint that I'll be doing final details with. I'm going to use the permanent rose pink on the nose of the kitten. I made sure to wipe away some of that excess paint on a sponge so that it doesn't get too large. I'm also going to use that permanent rose pink for the mouth area. And I need to give this whole area some space. So I'm going to water down some burnt umber. And I'm just going to add basically the lightest little freckles on the cheek of the kitten. And these freckles will kind of represent where some whiskers might be coming out. Continuing to use this watered down brown to add some fur texture. I'm going to return to the tassels on the pillow. I'm using that permanent rose pink. You could really make the tassels any color you wish. And I'm just doing half the tassels with pink. I'm now going to get that darker purple to continue to push the shadows. So I'm staying on the back side of the leg. I'm going to use some of this darker purple on the side of the head where the shadows are. Adding some cadmium orange to brighten some sections up. And you can just continue to build your layers as you see fit. I'm going to grab some of that teal, that Viridian hue color. Now that the eyes are completely dry, I'm going to use that darker ultramarine blue, and I'm going to go around the outside edge of the eye just to give a little bit of a darker color. And I'm going to be willing to add some texture on the inside of that eye, but I don't want to just fill the whole thing in. Right now the kitten's eyes look kind of wild. All right, I'm going to come in with just some real strong, vibrant color so I can selectively darken some spots up. This is a real dark purple. I'm going to come in with some of the dark blue and just choose to darken up some areas of this pillow. I'm staying below that half stitch line. I can add some more purples below that stitch line as well. Let them kind of blend with some of those blues. But again, I'm not trying to blend things out. I'm just trying to create some interesting textures. I'm continuing with some of the purples underneath that stitch line on the opposite side. If there's puddling, just dry your brush and soak it up. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. Can get a little bit of the orange. Just add a splash of color above the stitch line. Using a practically clean, mildly damp brush just to kind of pull these colors around to create fun shapes. Can use some of that cerulean blue in some areas if I want. Just trying to make interesting shapes and textures. I need to go on top of these tassels with this darker mixture of color, just so it looks like layers. I'm going to get some real dark pink to continue with those tassel textures. I'm now going to use that really dark Payne's gray that is nearly a black to add some pupils to the cat's eyes. Trying to make them even, but knowing that the more I fiddle with them, the larger they'll become. So I have to at least reach a point where I'm like, well, it may not be perfect, but it's good enough. With this Payne's gray and a small brush, I'm going to wipe away the excess black paint. And I'm going to try and create a narrow, thin line that runs along the top of the kitten's eye. These eyes are giving me a little bit of a hard time. This kitten has personality. Okay. I'm going to use some of that dark pink on the nose and add a couple little nostrils. Even the nostrils are giving me a hard time. It's all right. This kitten has personality. So I'm going to give that some space. I'm going to try not to cry from laughing. I'm grabbing some of this bleed-proof white. I'm going to get some bright white on my brush. And I'm going to bring my brush to a point so I can kind of create some fur textures. And I just want some bright white fur on the front chest area here. If you need to, you could use this bright white to kind of add some fun little highlights to some of the other areas of your painting. Our light source is coming from the left on this piece. I know it's hard to tell, but I can come in and give little highlights. Adding some bright whites to the eyes now that they've had a chance to dry. Trying to just embrace the imperfections. All of our paintings are going to have different personalities. It's okay. So using a really light purple gray color just to get some texture on the pads of these paws. I can use a clean brush with just the tiniest bit of water to try and lift and clean up little details that maybe didn't go as planned on the first pass. I'm using this white to kind of correct part of the eye here. I'm going to add a little bit of that dark pink to the tear duct areas of the eyes. And I'm just kind of going around the bottom edge. I'm going to add just the tiniest bit of grayed out red. All right, Considering how tiny this painting is, I feel like that's as good as it's going to get. You can add a splash of color to the background. You can keep playing with details. But ultimately, I just hope you keep painting, having fun, and don't forget to laugh during the painting process. You just got to go with the flow. So after I stopped recording, I added just a little bit more darks to the eyes and underneath the kitten just to push some of my shadows. And I realized I forgot to add whiskers. So I have a liner brush. This is just a #1 rigger. And I'm getting some opaque white paint, but I'm wiping that excess paint off. And I'm now going to come to the side of this cheek here and try and drag some thin, long lines to indicate some whiskers. Now I can do the same on the opposite side, but part of the whisker won't show up because of the white background. If you want some of those whiskers to show up on your background, you can get just the most watered down brown and you can try to line up with some of your white whiskers just so they show on the background a little bit. To add a splash of color behind the kitten, completely optional, but you can add some water, keeping it distant from the kitten. And I like the idea of having a light cerulean blue color. I'm going to soak up any puddling I might have using a clean, dry brush. And then I can just get water on my brush to kind of extend and play with the shape of this background. But I want that irregular edge. I think it's fun. I think it's playful. If you want, you could add some splashes of darker blue here and there. But I don't want to overdo it because I want the focal point to still be the colorful kitten. I hope you have a blast with this tutorial. Just have fun. Have a great day. If you've been enjoying my watercolor tutorials and would like to support the channel, consider buying me a cup of coffee or a tube of watercolor paint. A $5 Venmo contribution is always appreciated, but never expected. Your support helps make future tutorials possible.